The Sony A6400, I think we can all agree, is a brilliant little pocket rocket, but it is now 2025, and things have certainly developed in Sony's APS-C lineup since we last spoke in depth about this camera, including the release of one of my favourite APS-C cameras of all time, the Sony A6700. And I think that's one of the driving reasons I get this question a lot still in my DMs. Is the Sony A6400 still worth it? Well, to answer that question, let's start at the top. The Sony A6400 was released back in 2019, making this thing officially 6 years old, and when this camera was initially released, it became very popular with photo and video shooters alike. The camera design has stood up well to the test of time. I have had this thing in a multitude of different weathering conditions, I've thrown it about, accidentally dropped it a couple of times, it's got a couple of batter scars, it's been proper battered and bruised, but every time fights to live another day. The form factor is another big plus point, and it's one of the key reasons myself and so many others love Sony's APS-C lineup. This camera is lightweight, it only weighs 403 grams, it's nice and compact, making it a really easy and nice everyday carry. And for people who are just starting out, this camera is ideal because, well, look at it, it doesn't exactly scream professional to the average Joe, but we know we can capture professional shots using it. I like this camera especially for street photography because it allows you to be a little bit more sneaky and incognito. I like that. Now, the design of this camera, it isn't perfect, and there are a few downsides I have found from my years of hands-on experience. The first is the grip. I only noticed how small the grip was on the A6400 after using the A6700, which has a much more chunkier and comfortable grip. However, not a deal breaker. If you do have slightly larger hands, you can always get a cage for the A6400 to make it more comfortable, but for me, it still fits snugly enough in the hand. So moving on to the two real design criticisms that I have with the A6400, the first being the microphone placement, because when you put a microphone on top and try and flip the LCD screen, mic's gonna be in the way and you can't see your own beautiful face. However, there is a really straightforward and easy solution for this. You can get this mic adapter relocator, which moves the mic placement from the middle of the camera to the side of the camera, ideal for anybody who is going to be doing a lot of filming with this camera. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, along with everything else I'm mentioning today, including some lens recommendations, which I'll also speak more about later in today's video. The second criticism I have is with the rear LCD screen. While the EVF is high quality with a 2.36 million OLED display, the rear LCD falls short with its 921K dot display. Whenever I look at the rear LCD screen in this camera, I never have that confidence with the photos I'm taking because the sharpness looks naff, the colours look off, and it's only until I get my photos on the computer that I actually think, oh wait, these actually look great. So what I try and do as an alternative when I'm shooting with this camera is use the EVF to review my photos and videos. Speaking of video, I have some mixed thoughts when it comes to the video specs found on the A6400, but let's start with the positives first. First off, it can shoot 4K up to 30 FPS, you have terrific video autofocus that you can rely on, and when you want to slow things down, you can shoot in 1080 up to 120 FPS. So that's the good, but now moving on to some of the negatives, starting with bit depth, which is fundamental for color grading. The A6400 is only equipped with an 8-bit sensor, which from my experience makes color grading a little more trickier compared to a 10-bit sensor. Don't get me wrong, you can still achieve some impressive color grading with this camera. I mean, all the footage you are seeing right now was filmed in S-Log2 on the A6400, so it ain't bad. That said, working with 8-bit footage can be trickier, especially when you're pushing the grade heavily. If video is going to be your prime and key focus, I'd suggest looking at the A6700. It has a 10-bit sensor, which is going to give you a lot more flexibility in post-production with color grading. It also has higher frame rates and in-body image stabilization, which is something that is missing on the A6400. I wouldn't say it is essential for everyday photography, but if you are going to be shooting a lot of video with this camera, especially handheld stuff, then I would say it is a must-have. Now, I'm saying all of this with the benefit of having used the A6700. We have to keep in mind, myself included, that this camera is now 6 years old, so the video specs aren't going to be a match for today's standards. However, for a beginner on a budget, this is a fantastic place to start. I mean, just for reference, my very first DSLR camera was a Nikon D5200, which had no picture profiles. It could shoot 1080 up to 30 FPS and 720 at 60 FPS. So if this was my very first camera, I'd be chuffed. Switching things up to the photography side of things, this is the little pocket rocket that packs one hell of a punch. The A6400 is equipped with a 24.2 APS-C sensor, 425 phase detection and contrast detection AF points that deliver lightning fast and reliable autofocus that is also paired with face and eye tracking. 11 FPS burst shooting, making this an ideal choice for wildlife and sports photographers. And let's not forget to mention this camera is pretty good in those lower light conditions. Some of my favourite shots have been captured using this camera. I've primarily used it for street photography, but if you're planning on using it for landscapes, cars, wildlife, portrait, sports, street or anything else, I guarantee it'll be able to handle anything you throw its way. You know what? I can actually say with 100% confidence that this camera can do some paid professional gigs. So as a first camera, you might also be able to start making some money with it as well. Now let's move on to lenses, and a huge benefit with this camera, and to be fair that actually applies to all Sony cameras, is the E-mount. Thinking about it, the E-mount is probably one of the most supportive mounts of all time, and on the APS-C front, you have a lot of lenses available from some great brands. With this ecosystem, you're going to be able to get some great glass that isn't going to break the bank, and I do have some lens recommendations from my own hands-on experience. First and foremost, as a first lens, I would recommend anybody going for an all-round zoom lens, and the one that I can easily recommend is the mighty Sigma 18-50 f2.8. It's compact, sharp, versatile, and has a fixed aperture. If you need a lens to start with, I'd say avoid a kit lens and grab yourself this. You'll be much better off because of it. In terms of primes, my favourite two on APS-C is the Sigma 23mm f1.4 and the Sigma 56mm f1.4. The 23mm is fantastic for street photography, allowing you to place your subject within the scene and add context, which enhances storytelling. It's actually my favourite focal length on APS-C for street photography. The 56mm is excellent for isolating subjects and emphasising specific details within the frame. Its focal length naturally provides beautiful compression, and when you pair that with an f1.4 aperture, the results are effortlessly smooth and visually stunning. If I could only have 3 lenses in my APS-C arsenal, I think it would have to be those 3. So from my hands-on experience using this camera for the last 4 or 5 years now, I can say with absolute certainty it is a fantastic place to start for anybody who is looking at getting started in photography. The A6400 may not be equipped with the best specs in the world, it might not be the latest and greatest camera model, but I don't think that's important. When you're starting out in photography or filmmaking, your sole aim and objective should be about learning the creative process, understanding things such as lighting, composition, and the exposure triangle. It can be really easy to get trapped down the rabbit hole and just obsess over camera gear and the specs found inside of them, and I speak from experience there. So my best advice is to not focus on the specs and instead focus on just picking up a camera, practicing, getting out there, and creating. To summarise then, is the Sony A6400 still worth it in 2025? Absolutely, and it will be in 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, and probably even 2030. If I had to be brutally honest, I would say the A6400 is better aimed towards photographers as opposed to videographers. Don't get me wrong, you can capture amazing video using this camera, and if you're looking at just starting out and dabbling in video or YouTube content creation, then this could be a solid place to start. But if your sole aim is to go all in on the video front, I'd say you're better off looking at something like the A6700. However, for photographers, it is a terrific camera. It's lightweight, it's compact, and really easy to travel with. You'll be able to capture amazing photos with this camera, and it will tick all the right boxes in terms of image quality, autofocus, and versatility. So yeah, ultimately, the A6400 is a brilliant camera. It will teach you so much about photography and filmmaking, and will be a great start for your creative journey. Alright, that is where I'm going to be leaving today's video, but just before you go, if you want to see a complete setup guide to the A6400, then check out this video right here. And with all that said and done, until next time, create, explore, and inspire.